is going to be recorded from now. So we ask you to keep your mic muted and your video disabled. And if you have any question all along, please put them in the chat and I can read them out loud when there's time for it. And I think that's about it. So welcome, Wolfgang and Jonas. Maybe you can enable your videos. Yes. And let's start this panel about swarm management. So maybe we can start with a very simple question just to get started talking. Which use case, in which case would you use Crazy Swarm versus the CFlib? Maybe we can start with Wolfgang.
Sure. I can mostly talk about the Crazy Swarm, of course. And I would say that the Crazy Swarm has a fairly high entry point in the sense that you need to know ROS, you need to maybe know Ubuntu and so on. So it's more targeting for researchers who have some experience. In terms of applications, I feel it's very flexible. So you have the simulation tools, you can do centralized operations, decentralized operations. So it allows users to really make best use of their swarm.
Yeah, Jonas.
Okay, yeah. I mean, from 0 to flying, I mean, it's quite a big difference between the Crazy Swarm and the CFlib, because the Crazy Swarm utilizes the ROS platform, the Robotic Operating System. Is that the correct acronym, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Wolfgang is nodding. This is a powerful platform. This kind of kitchen sink included platform, right? But it provides you a bunch of things, great simulation and interconnect with different modules and stuff like that. But it comes at the price then of having a bit of a setup and these targeting certain Ubuntu versions. So 9 times out of 10 you use a virtual machine to set it up because you don't want to touch anything and lose all your state, right? So when you have an idea and say, I want to try this, then you might want to use something like the Crazyfly library, the CFlib. So you see, can I have this quickly up and running? But then when you want to go a step further, maybe finalizing your research thoughts, getting into the nitty-gritty, the details, having it flying perfectly with generated directories and stuff like that, then you might move on, I would say, to something like Crazy Swarm or something else. I think that's what I see.
Yeah, you made me, or maybe we'll come back to it later. What do you see as the weakest point of the respective system? Maybe we already touched on it a little bit.
Yeah, I think we did. So in terms of the Crazy Swarm, it's the initial setup and prior knowledge that you need to know, and also the somewhat strict requirements of your underlying system, like the specific Ubuntu and ROS version.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, and I guess the weakness we have is, I guess, the swarm things in the Crazyfly library has not been designed by anyone with swarm expertise, domain knowledge, I would say. It's more Bitcraze putting a finger up in there and saying what kind of function do we think a swarm developer would need, and maybe not even that, maybe more what do we need to do our demos and stuff like that, more at Bitcraze. So the weakness might be that it's too demo centric or something like that, because we end at a certain point. Now we can show this off and then no more. So we don't have a clear picture of what a swarm managing professional or researcher needs from his or her library. I would say that might be a weakness. That and the whole Python concurrency limitations, I would say.
Yeah, you made me think about something, but the Python and the Python lim has one characteristic that the ROS has maybe lacks a little bit, is that it would allow someone to make a program that is that could be distributed much more easily. Is that an advantage for Swarm research, or is that not really something that is ever be useful?
What do you mean by
You can.
distributed?
It's
distributing it
essentially
easier?
it's essentially just a Python package. So you could build an exe out of it, and just ship it, or build a Python something that you just pip install, and then you have your nice custom-made Swarm management or Swarm program.
Yeah, I think it depends on the user base. Like, I agree if you want to use it at an art installation or a museum or something like that. That's a big advantage. But the Crazy Swarm wasn't really made for that purpose. You definitely always have this pain of setting it up initially.
And another question there. Say someone want to reproduce something made with the Crazy Swarm. How hard or easy is that today? It's tangential to, I guess, to the distribution question.
Well, I mean, if assuming that it's open source, then you would at least have kind of the version of the Crazy Swarms they used, and then you would need to figure out what robot configuration it actually relied on, and then it should be just a matter of running it. But in practice, I think what I find is that often your scripts are very, let's say, targeted to your environment. So maybe it's hard-coded how big your capture space is where you can fly in, or those things. And that make it more difficult to reproduce it in a completely different lab.
Okay. Another question. You showed in your talk earlier about Crazy Swarm, you had a slide about management, more like technician type stuff. You had the Python application with the buttons and the radio buttons and the stuff like that. Do you think it would be beneficial for us to add more stuff like that into the Bitcraze offering? Both in terms, I guess, we can focus on Swarm for more like safety stuff, like being a big red button in UI, or having a dedicated class or function just for dealing with administrative tasks like restarting, resetting, finding which crazy flies which, more like of these setup technician type of stuff.
I guess it goes maybe more in the direction of what the CF client should be. Because right now, the CF lib that has the swarming capability is a library only and doesn't have any graphical user interface. And then the CF client is basically for a single crazy fly, but has a lot of those kind of very useful capabilities. On the other hand, the Crazy Swarm is kind of a mix. Like, it has mostly scripting layers for programming, but it also has a few graphical user interface tools that can help you doing it. And so I would say that, yes, it would be absolutely nice if there would be an official software that would support that. And I would probably be more like this CF client revamp that actively supports swarms.
I see.
Maybe it's a nice way to talk about the future, actually, if you want. Which feature do you think should be transferred from Crazy Fly to the CF lib, and vice versa?
If any.
If any, if any, of course.
I would say, from my perspective, definitely the broadcast communication would be nice, because, like, for example, in like the CF lib demo, there was a sequential takeoff, and that just doesn't look quite as cool as like a truly parallel simultaneous takeoff.
Well, I disagree.
That we have. And then also selfishly, I like to have it because it means that you actually test it. And that means there's fewer issues potentially for first-time users if there's breaking changes. The other thing I really would like to push forward is Python bindings that we use. That we kind of want in the official firmware, because that allows many use cases that I think are interesting for single robots and also for swarms in terms of simulation.
Yeah. And to be ultra clear, you mean the possibility of interfacing with the actual firmware code while running Python scripts on your computer?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's something we want to do as well at Bitcraze. We want to make it easier to provide Python bindings, such as the way you and James from the Crazy Swarm project has been doing. It's been inspiring for us once we understood it. And we want to make it easier for people to have these kinds of software in the loop simulations using the Crazy Fly firmware. And it's also interesting for us for our own testing capabilities here, trying to scale from 7 people and 1 million products into something we can keep stable. Is there any questions in the chat? Don't be scared, people. You can ask any question you feel like.
But also, I mean, I would like to know what you think, Jonas, should maybe go into CFLib, since you disagreed earlier.
Yeah, I think this is a very difficult topic because, as I alluded to a bit in my talk, it's not often that people from Bitcraze sit down and write their own applications, right? We do not for want of wanting, because it's fun, it's cool having stuff fly around, but we also running Bitcraze with 7 people. It's a lot of making sure production is running, making sure production testing, making sure the GitHub is answered, the forum is answered, creating new hardware, and taking time. We're not really. I mean, Kimberly is an expert, but we're not really a domain experts in the field of running robots. So we need the input of the community, right, to know where to focus our efforts, because there's only so much bandwidth of the employees at Bitcraze. So, I mean, we could aim for having trying to usurp Crazy Swarm within the CFLib, saying, oh no, we don't want robots, we want this simple thing but still powerful thing. We can spend a lot of time making cool communication things, parallelization and management all in one, having it close to the source, maintained by Bitcraze, and probably people might benefit from that, but it's not obvious to us it's there we should focus. And then it becomes a question of, where is the cutoff point? Is the CFLib something to make it easier for you to start, and then at a certain point you should go and write your own stuff? Or should we aim to try up to this level, like 11.5 Crazy Flies is supported with the CFLib, and we guarantee it will be a nice experience? It's very hard for us to answer this thing. We need input from people saying, I want to write my research or my show application using Python, but the problem is this, and this. If you can fix these issues at Bitcraze, I will use it, or something like that. So I think we have the possibility of aiming at different levels, but we need more community input to know where to focus, I would say. Otherwise, I think the level we have today will be the default if we don't hear otherwise. We will have simple helper functions in a swarm class and nothing more, I would say. We will not object to people trying to improve it, but I don't think it will be a big push from Bitcraze today to do anything more.
But would you like to get pull requests that add more features, or is that also annoying because it increases maintenance load?
Yeah, this is a good question, very good question, because you have the puppy effect, right? Here's a free puppy. How can you say no to a free puppy, right? It's awesome. But then you have to take care of it, and that's not so awesome. That sucks. So, I mean, but the level of issues we get today and the level of pull requests we get today is far below what we can handle, right? We could have order of magnitude more pull requests and an order of magnitude more issues filed by the community today, and it will still be fine. And it will be fine for us to look at some code and say, this is awesome. In order for us to maintain it, we would probably need to scale it down, or this is awesome. Would you be willing to be put up as a link for help for maintaining this or something? It's always good to have the discussion, I would say. Do you agree, Anno?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, sounds about right. As usual, I mean, it's very, very apparent when making product, but it's also very true when making the software that assists the product, is that the hardest is not necessarily to do, the hardest is to know what to do and what are the specification and what are people needing, basically. And you've talked about us working on demos, and I mean, we've done on this Swarm stuff, this has been demo-driven development, pretty much. Each time we go to conference, we try to make a demo that ones up the previous year's demo, and then we add functionality for that. But it's very unlikely this fits what the user wants when they use a Swarm with Crazyfly. There must be a mismatch. And it's very hard to know the mismatch if we don't get feedback. So yeah.
Yeah, and it also becomes a category issue, right? Is Bitcraze a company that provides a full offering for the dwarf enthusiast, the drone enthusiast, or is Bitcraze a company that provides hardware and allows people to do fancy stuff with it?
Yeah.
And that's a good question.
Where do we stop?
Yeah.
Yeah, and in that sense, Crazy Swarm has been really awesome because it has been something that, from our point of view, is on site. That has allowed a lot of people to do super nice work with the Crazyfly. So that has been a great advantage. But of course, there is a drawback in having something that is. I mean, it's very hard to maintain something on the side that way because you need to synchronize development.
Yes, that's basically the problem for us, why we like to basically create pull requests and offload as much as possible, because it means less maintenance. And also, if we then don't use a feature for a year, we can go back and it will just work, basically.
And I guess this is why we've had a lot of work on testing lately, because this is the basis on being able to maintain this kind of thing from our side, because it is very, very hard to test everything manually.
Yeah. Did we have a poll set up as well?
Yes, we can launch a poll maybe. That's a good idea. We had a pool with which tool would you use to create a swarm? Rose, CFlib. So yeah, it shouldn't be, sorry, I'm gonna edit the pool slightly. Can I do that? Yes, I can. So it's Crazy Swarm. CFlib, both, none, and maybe we can add Rose as well. I mean, what is the state? That's a question for Wolfgang. What is the state of the Rose Crazy Swarm Crazyfly package?
It's officially deprecated and put in read-only mode. So if you use the Crazyfly with ROS, even a single one, you're supposed to use a Crazy Swarm.
Okay.
There are not all features moved over yet. Like, for example, we had, I think, manual teleoperation in the old ROS package, which might not be in the Crazy Swarm yet. But that is basically considered a bug. So if you need it, you can open an issue on GitHub, and we will work on kind of re-implementing it so that you can use it.
And yes, we still have a branch of CMake file in the lib and in the client that, as far as I remember, were for ROS support. I assume that can be removed now.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Because I remember at some point there was, you started working with CFlib in ROS, right? And then you moved to C++.
Yes, at the very beginning, it was just a layer on top of CFlib.
Yes. Yeah, perfect. So the pool is up. Yeah, we've touched on that a little bit, but maybe we could talk a little bit about like maybe cooperation and code sharing between the Bitcraze made libs and the Crazy Swarm. What do you think functionality? What functionality should be shared and what should stay separated? Like, is there anything we want to keep separated and things we actually want to share and maintain together?
I would say if you see the software stacks pretty much as upside down pyramid or something like that, tetrahedron. The lowest, if the point, the lowest library is like communicating with radio and stuff like that, and the security link layer stuff should be shared, I think. I don't think there's much benefit of innovation there, and even if there is, I think it should be shared across all. So I would say going up or down, depending on your frame of reference in this upside down pyramid. Well, moving towards the base, which is now on the top, less things should be shared. Can anyone put that more less complicated?
I don't know. I kind of disagree because I feel in an ideal case we would share almost everything because that means let's work. Like in my ideal case, Crazy Swarm would be just the ROS layer around official software from Bitcraze. And that's what we kind of started at the beginning. And then we developed all those like customized solutions because we were, for some reason, not happy with the official software. But ideally, the official software would deliver all of that, and the Crazy Swarm would basically be super simple, just like translating from one ecosystem to another.
But if you expand on it, what you're saying is pretty much the code, the meat of the code, the what you call it, binding code or shim code, should be hosted on Bitcraze repositories and receiving testing at Bitcraze.
Yes.
But I'm guessing you still imagine yourself doing some work in these repositories, or do you see Bitcraze being the main driver of functionality and innovation in these parts as well?
Well, I like the open source idea behind all of the repositories. So what I imagine is that whenever a researcher needs some functionality that's not there or that maybe doesn't work properly, that there's a community contribution to improve it, and then everybody else can use it.
And there's some kind of you say certification-ish vibe to it. A stamp of approval saying it's from Bitcraze as well might ease knowing that you're using something that has a chance to work, I guess.
Yes, that means that it's at least tested once and that it's also being maintained, and also that somebody looked at the code and made sure that it doesn't look completely insane. Right.
For given values of insane, of course. Yes, that's interesting. What's your thoughts, Ano?
One second. Yeah, at least starting from the bottom. I mean, the current situation, like this reversed pyramid you talked about, the current situation where we do not share anything at all is definitely not good or perfect. So yeah, starting from the bottom, at least the communication and also maybe implementing the API to the Crazyfly. Because this is typically the kind of thing that can break very easily because we will put a new version out of. I mean, we try to be careful not breaking compatibility because we know that there is user that will use down to the radio packet. But we may break compatibility at some point, and having a good enough lib that everyone can use would actually simplify that because we can raise. We've been talking about API here internally. Currently, the API to the Crazyfly is a CRTP packet. That's the stablest thing we have. we could work at raising the API to like a C API, C++ API, Rust API, I don't know, but something that is a little bit more usable by another software. But that's what we would essentially do, I guess, if we were to host a lib that would be used by Crazy Swarm and by everyone else.
Yeah, and then we will have, we've talked about this before, then we will treat the CRTP as a sort of ABI layer, some kind of binary interface, and we could say the API layer is these functions to create some kind of nuance.
So, but that's also that gets a bit philosophical as well. It's like, then does CRTP need to be stable or not? Because CRTP has some problems with history. I mean, it was created in 2010. So, I mean, it would be nice to be free to change completely that and make it new and improved with Crazy Radio 2, with bigger packet and everything. And if you have an API which is at the software level, then you can do that fairly easily, because you will not affect any of the user. If we would do that now, we would break every third party or every other lib that uses Crazyfly, including Crazy Swarm.
Yeah, speaking about there's a question in the chat from Christopher, or a comment rather.
Yes.
It's something that's also important. If we look at the BAM days and our talks and our discussion here, we're not mentioning much about the show drones, because these often have their own swarm management system and software, right? And I'm not sure, are there anyone out there using Crazy Swarm for shows that you're aware of, Wolfgang?
No, I'm not aware of anybody who actively uses it. There were a few people who tried using it at some point, but I don't think they do active drone shows right now.
But this is also something we would like to hear about from people out there doing or thinking about doing shows with the Crazyfly. What have you tried the CF Lib? Have you tried Crazy Swarm? Get in touch with the limitation and issues you have encountered. We do not promise anything, but it's interesting for us to know how and we can help people and how our software is being used.
Yeah. And like Christopher noted, there starts to be interest from commercial companies making commercial software for controlling the Crazyfly in the show context, because that is a very, very specialized skill. I mean, there's a lot of requirements that are very different from running the drone for research.
But still, research would benefit from those requirements. Like, for example, reliability and safety is a big question there, and that is something that researchers would love to have, because it currently takes too much time to run experiments.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I guess my thought was that it is very nice to have for a researcher. It is an absolute must for a show if you don't get it. So in that sense, yes, it's making Crazyfly work for show will actually improve a lot the experience for all the users, because this safety and the fact that this should work all the time, every time, will help everyone. We have a question for first. Let's start with that. Which tool would you use to create a swarm? We have 33% Crazy Swarm, 53% CFLib, and 13% ROS, and no one says none. So no one wants to write his own swarm management software. That's good. We worked for something. But that's interesting. So Python, I think it may be but it's 50-50 basically between ROS and CFLib. And I assume one of the driving thing is that if you already use ROS, you will tend to continue using ROS. If you don't, it is a little bit scary. Yes, we're getting very close to be over time, but maybe we can take the Tobias question very quickly, and then maybe wrap up with some closing word. So Tobias asking, the awesome Swarm demo shown at the end of the Crazy Swarm presentation was based on Crazy Swarm, but not fully. Have you, Wolfgang, tried to get this functionality merged? If so, what did not work out, and do you know why? I assume that's the demo where the Crazyfly were going really fast.
Yes, exactly. So that was done at the University of Toronto. I talked to them a few years ago, and they basically created a fork right when the Crazy Swarm came out and did a lot of great things. They were the first ones who actually had the single marker tracking. And then I saw it in their lab and I just implemented as well because I thought, okay, that's really cool. They were open to merging, but I think they didn't really have the resources to kind of actively do it because they forked so early. It diverged quite a lot. So I'm not exactly sure where the differences are and if they even are related to the Crazy Swarm itself or also the firmware. For example, they might use better controllers than what we currently ship by default.
Yes, and we have one more question from Osman. Did you thought about switching to the ultra-wideband chip for communication and basic I/O? For example, resetting flight control chip and drop support for NRF51. I guess I can answer this one because I've been working with both. Having data communication through ultra-wideband is very interesting. If anyone wants to do it, I will definitely accept the pull request for it. The communication stack in the CrazyFly is already designed for accepting CRTP packet for multiple medium, not at the same time, but we can switch. Dropping NRF51 is not, dropping the 2.4 gigahertz radio right now is not at all planned. There is nothing else that can replace it for low latency, reliable communication, or nothing easily accessible. I mean, there's a very cool chirp radio that exists, but those are pretty special. So right now, 2.4 gigahertz packet radio based on NRF will always be like the basic way to communicate with CrazyFly. But others can be added. And 5G can definitely, there's an added comment about supply chains, a big issue, but I think it will be more 5G compatible. 5G is definitely interesting, and we can make a deck for it. Same thing. Everything is set up to accept CRTP packet from external things.
There's a deck for that.
There will be, yeah, not yet, but that's definitely an interesting 5G deck would be very interesting, actually. So yeah. So yes, now we're definitely over time, but is there any closing word or things you want to say?
It's probably easier to impact the direction of the CrazyFly lib than you imagine.
Yes. Oh yes, for sure. Yes. We are aware of the full history layer of the lib, and we're definitely interested about getting direction to improve it. There's so many things we could do. We just need to find out what to work on first. Wolfgang, anything?
Sure. Crazy Swarm is an awesome open source project, and we are happy to take issues or pull requests, and also look forward to hear from you about your use cases and how to improve it.
Yeah. So thank you very much. That was a very interesting talk. Next talk will be, I do not have the agenda, I'm very sorry.
At 1:30, Tobias will talk about the Bolt and the big quadic. It will be very exciting.
Yes, it will. I'm going to be filming it, and nothing wrong will happen. So that's going to be great. So see you then there.